So this is the Grand Seiko SLGH005 White Birch. It is a watch that has been talked about quite a lot in my home since it was released at the beginning of this year, and now that it moved in with us, well, we talk about it even more. And so in today's video I want to share with you its 12 most important features, and at the end I want to add my 2 cents because I do have a bone to pick with this one. So let's get started. Right, so the first feature is the finishing of the case. To quote the title of my previous Grand Seiko video, it's Grand Seiko, you know what's going to happen, which means that we are looking at probably the closest thing to perfection when it comes to watch case finishings. Grand Seiko calls it Zaratsu polishing, and this type of finishing really enhances the look of the case even more. The light breaks really beautifully, and you can immediately tell that this is something special. It's the perfect symbol for the Japanese understanding of aesthetics that, depending on who you're asking, only gets interrupted by those pesky little holes at the end of the lugs. But let's talk about the case shape and size. I mean, who is able to pull this watch off? Well, thanks to the slight curve of the case, the watch itself sits comfortably on the wrist. It isn't too thick either, measuring about 11.7 millimeters in height, which is nice too. It has a diameter of 40 millimeter and a lug to lug of 47 millimeter, which is rather compact in relation to its diameter. It's proportion wise comparable to a Rolex Submariner, so most wrists are able to handle its size, though I would draw the line at my own wrist here. Next up, I want to mention the bezel because there's a really cool effect that doesn't show in the press release photos. I mean, we know that those Grand Seiko bezels are finished to perfection, but there's a nice detail on this one. Thanks to the linear vertical brushing, the bezel really stands out when the light hits it. And I know it might sound strange, but there was this moment where I was, sitting on my desk and my husband stood in the doorway, and let me tell you, that bezel completely outshined the dial. It's almost like this silver kind of halo framing everything. Anyways, let's get to the star of this watch. Grand Seiko is known for its complex and intricate dials, and this one in particular mimics the bark of a birch tree. It's a tree that can be found growing around Grand Seiko's design studios in this city in Japan. I'm going to put it up on the screen. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it because I'm just going to butcher it. And it's crazy how detailed that dial is. I mean, this is how it looks underneath an ultra macro lens. The best way to experience it remains to see this one live in person. Another impressive detail is the fact that Grand Seiko managed to get their lettering on that dial without any blots either. It remains sharp as ever. Next up are the hands. I am not sure if I am able to share with you another watch that matches this level of finishing. It looks razor sharp, and thanks to its size and edge, it stands out just enough against the dial so you don't have any problems telling the time. The second hand is a very classic blued needle-like hand that would probably disappear if it was any thinner. One thing this watch doesn't have is luminous material though, which brings me to its next feature. The shape of the indices is the same we know from the 60th anniversary model that I have showed you in my previous video, and again, those hour markers, they just look like computer animations. It's crazy because they are so good and so detailed. You have these sloping edges and then this mirror-like surface and all these other lines which makes them sparkle, but thankfully not overwhelmingly flashy. The special hour marker sits at 12 with those double lines, but yeah, no looms there either. And lastly, another detail on the dial before we move on to other parts. The date at 3 is beautifully framed and not just, a simple cutout date window. The only thing that really is bothering me here though is that the date isn't placed right in the center, and that's just annoying. The bracelet is the next big feature, and it continues the impressive level of finishing. The brushing on it is fine and rather subtle. The best part is how it feels though. There are 0 sharp edges. Each link has been softly rounded, and you can even see that the sides have this very little edge, like a double contour, which makes this bracelet feel like and I'm sorry, there seems to be no English word for it. A Handschmeichler is what we would say in German, which, is this thing that you can buy. It can be a stone or like some piece of wood, and it's just meant to feel nice in your hand. So yeah, you Germans out there probably know what I'm talking about. Anyways, details and finishing like this is usually something you would expect to see in much more expensive watches from Patek Philippe, for example, or anything above the 20,000 price range. Next up, I want to show you the clasp. It's Grand Seiko's familiar folding clasp with twin pushers, which closes with the Grand Seiko square software on top of it. There's a form of quick adjustment, so a tool is necessary to fine tune it, but there are two shorter links which help to find the perfect fit for you. And the last feature of this bracelet is something that divides a lot of watch people. The taper, or better, the non-existent taper on this bracelet, it goes straight down from the case to the clasp, which makes sure that this watch looks much more sporty from the side than you would expect it to be. And the last two features can be found when we look at the movement, and they are also the main reasons why my husband bought this watch. The first one is the finishing on it. I mean, you can see it for yourself if you look at it, which you can see it through the case bag. You can totally see how it is on par with other grades such as Patek. This caliber 9SA5 is just as beautiful, and I'm happy that nothing is blocking the view and that you get the full experience of it. This balance between cool and warm tones in combination with the stripes and these smooth out edges is really calming to look at, and the skeletonized rotor is the cherry on top of it all. And so the last feature is the technology of the movement itself. As printed on here, you can see that this is a hybrid movement. It oscillates with 36,000 vibrations per hour, so that makes 10 times per second. Most other watches are at the 6 or 8 mark per second, and most of them only offer a power reserve of about like 35 and 40 hours at that performance level. Grand Seiko solves this problem of a short power reserve by integrating two spring barrels. They are basically storing the energy, and you can see them here placed side by side. This gives this Grand Seiko a power reserve of about 80 hours, which is way more than most comparable watches, which means that you can have this lying around for more than 3 days without it stopping. And according to Grand Seiko, it runs with an accuracy of about +5 to -3 seconds per day. Right, and so here you have it. And like I promised, I wanted to throw in my 2 cents at the end of this video because there is something that I have to get off my chest. First up, let me say that I think this is a really fantastic watch. The fact that Grand Seiko priced it just below the 10,000 puts this into a very competitive price bracket, and I think that not many other watches within that price bracket come anywhere close to the value this Grand Seiko offers for the money. And I guess that's exactly why the following 2 things bother me so much. I mean, I just touched on the fact that this bracelet doesn't taper, and while I think that this isn't a big deal for a lot of people, I cannot help but think that this is not only such a missed opportunity to make this watch look better on smaller wrists, but it is also a design choice that robs this watch of so much potential. The case and the dial are so elegant and thought through that this taperless bracelet feels clumsy right next to it. There's probably a very good reason as to why it is the way it is, but dang, I mean, I really wish it did something different with it. And secondly, I assume that each dial might be a bit different in its birch design, and I don't know how exactly it is manufactured or how they work this birch bark pattern into it, but I somehow imagine that they would have this, I don't know, like huge plate into which they would work the pattern, and then they just punch out each dial individually. But I checked it. Every watch I have seen so far has the exact same birch pattern on it. Every stroke is the exact same. And I know, this may sound ridiculous, but I cannot tell you why I was so disappointed when I noticed that. For some reason, I expected it to be unique to a certain extent. Anyhow, like I said, that's just my 2 cents at the end of the day, and they by no means overshadow how amazing that watch is in general. But now I want to know from you. Let me know your take on this white birch in the comments down below. And as always, if you have enjoyed this video, you can give it a thumbs up. It really helps out the channel. And if you want to see more videos like this, you can subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!